Well, it's about that time of year again. The days are getting shorter, the leaves are changing colors, bonfires are lit, and flannels are on. If you're anything like me, the fall season is something you look forward to year after year, and you're eager to experience it all. In a video game. All jokes aside, I feel like I struggle every year to find new titles that really scratch the itch of the season, but there are many that I return to year after year for their atmosphere, story, or both. There's plenty of games out there that capture the various moods and atmospheres of the season, with stories ranging from tender-hearted to dark and horrifying, and settings from beautiful lush forests to eerie lakeside towns. Odds are, you clicked on this video because you're looking for the same thing. And you're in luck. I did all the work for you and found 15 accessible, well, mostly accessible, games that help liven up the spooky season. And if you've already played the ones I mentioned, don't fret, there's plenty of related games I'll bring up as well. Whether you're looking for stories in scenic sunset forests, a stroll through a haunted house, or uncovering a small town mystery, we got a little something for everybody. Through this video, I'll be giving you a taste of the story, gameplay, and overall tone of each game, as well as cover why I feel they fit the vibe of the season. Story buffs rejoice as I will be sure to avoid any major spoilers, so you can experience these games to their fullest extent, but, as such, I may have to gloss over a few details here or there. Hopefully in this video I'll introduce a number of games that may be new to you, or convince you to replay a few that maybe you haven't picked up in a while. These are in no particular order, and there's plenty of reasons for and against why certain games were made part of the list, and I had a ton of internal debate on whether or not to include or exclude certain titles, and it goes without saying that this list is totally subjective and arbitrary, based on the games that I've had experiences with. I did not exclude your favorite fall game out of spite, more likely is that I never got a chance to play it, so if you think something belongs in this list that isn't present, drop it in a comment, because I am always growing my library. Ooh, and before I forget, some of these games are actually a bit scary, and as such I'm adding an arbitrary spookometer to give warning to any of our easily frightened viewers. On a related note, some, but not all of these titles featured, may include language, violence, blood and gore, frightening imagery, and unsettling themes, as well as other fun stuff, so parents be warned. With that lengthy preface out of the way, go ahead and grab yourself a slice of pumpkin pie or crack a cool Oktoberfest, and let's dive into 15 games worth playing during the season of fall. Okay, you knew this was going to be in here somewhere. The channel is literally called Riverwood Chicken, so let's just get this one out of the way now. Unless you've been sleeping under a rock for the past 13 years, you're probably already familiar with the action RPG sensation that is Skyrim. The game offers little in terms of a genuine role-playing experience, but its world is rife with scenic beauty and rich lore. Where Skyrim really thrives is the open world experience. Bumping into random one-off quests or delving deep into the Dragon Age dungeons to serve a greater purpose, there's a serious amount of areas to explore, and damn if they don't all look absolutely picture perfect.
It's like a goddamn Bob Ross.
Most people are likely to associate Skyrim more closely with the snow-capped mountain ranges or the rocky northern tundra, but anyone who's played this game knows there's a ton of variety to the landscape. The golden plains of Whiterun, dense, lush woods of Falkreath, and most notably the amber-hued forests of the Rift, which, if you've seen my Skyrim city ranking video, you already know is my personal favorite. The Rift as a whole seems to be in a perpetual state of fall, with golden leaves dancing their way from the trees to the forest floor, and rivers winding between the roots of the trees, feeding into the surrounding lakes. A bit further south of Riften is the Dayspring Canyon, and this is where the fall season of Skyrim truly shines, as the canyon serves as the introduction to the Dawnguard DLC. Still operating on the assumption that someone watching this has never played Skyrim before, ever? Here's the basic premise of the DLC. An ancient vampire clan seeks to use the power of the Elder Scrolls to bring about a prophecy that will blot out the sun forever, giving vampires free reign over the world. And to quell the growing vampire threat, the player can choose to enlist with the Dawnguard, a faction of vampire hunters armed with axes, crossbows, armored trolls, and much more. The Dayspring Canyon mentioned earlier leads up to the fortress housing said vampire hunters, and my oh my if this isn't the pinnacle of Skyrim scenery. Fort Dawnguard is a bit run down at first, and it's up to the player to restore the faction to its former glory, then take the fight to the bloodsuckers abroad. Of course, if your player character is feeling a bit more evil, the vampires actually give you a chance to accept their dark gift, and become one of the many vampire lords of Castle Volkihar. The castle is set at the opposite end of the map, where it is always overcast, the gates are guarded by rows of stone gargoyles, which, yes, you get to fight them in the game, and crows are constantly circling overhead, waiting for scraps washing into the basin from the vampire's last meal. The castle is pretty dark, thematically speaking, with coffins instead of beds for a quick slumber, cells of human cattle sitting in the castle's underbelly, and a secret alchemy lab, which plays a key part in the DLC's main story, so no spoilers here. There's a little bit for everyone in this game. If quelling the undead doesn't suit your fall fantasies, I always look forward to constructing a player home that fits my character's preferences. This goes from building libraries to house the books that you've read by the hearth, the kitchen with an oven for baking sweet treats, or finding a quiet, cozy spot at the local stream to catch some fresh fish for your evening meal. There are also dozens of in-game quests and factions that scratch the itch of the macabre. Blood on the Ice is a legit murder mystery that takes place within Windhelm. The Dark Brotherhood is a guild of assassins that has a unique infatuation for blood and death. And pretty much any Daedric quest usually features some spiritually dark overtones, specifically the House of Horrors quest in Markarth, which seems to draw a little inspiration from Paranormal Activity. None of what I've talked about here even goes into the Creation Club content or mods, which gives the player an immense amount of customization to alter and re-experience the game to your liking. And though mod support on consoles is a shadow of its former self, it still boasts a staggering amount of player-made tweaks that can utterly transform the experience to a high degree. To keep myself from talking about Skyrim literally forever, I'll just say that if anything I've mentioned here strikes your interest, go play or replay this one, especially the DLC. If you like Skyrim, you may also like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, Elden Ring, or The Witcher 3, which features its own vampire-related DLC. Now that we have Skyrim out of the way, alright, here's something that's more straightforward and story-oriented as compared to the vast open world of a game that you definitely already know about. Life is Strange stands out among other episodic story-driven games with its paintbrush art style, time rewind feature, and idyllic small-town atmosphere. The story follows Max, a new student in her old town of Arcadia Bay, Oregon, returning for photography studies at a college-like prep school, Blackwell Academy. The experience isn't all she hopes for, with classic queen bee bullies, entitled rich kids, and outsiders like Max stick to the shadows and try not to be seen. Things get a bit strange for Max when she has a hyper-realistic nightmare of a giant tornado sweeping through the town. It only gets crazier when she suddenly discovers the ability to change the course of events by altering time, a la Donnie Darko.
That's stupid.
Using this ability, Max can solve puzzles, prevent disasters, or even incite them.
What the hell?
When one of the aforementioned rich bullies pulls a gun on a girl in the restroom, Max sets out to use her newfound ability to make things right, or, given the game's use of the butterfly effect, make a few things wrong. Like many other games of the genre, Life is Strange features a myriad of branching story paths based on your decisions.
Boom. Butterfly effect.
The big difference here is Max's ability to rewind time if you aren't happy with your choice. And just because you can do this doesn't mean that you'll make, quote, the right choice every time. Plenty of choices in the game are morally gray, and you find yourself in a ton of difficult situations for an 18-year-old girl. All of these choices influence the story, character relationships, and the events that unfold between them. The art style of the game makes you really feel like you're seeing the world through Max's eyes, reminiscent of what remains of Edith Finch. This goes as far as the menu screens, the collectibles, little doodles everywhere, diary entries, text threads between friends. It all really helps you to feel like you're in this kid's shoes. Peaceful and reflective melodies highlight the October beauty of Blackwell Academy's campus and beyond, with even screen indicators feeling evocative of Max's artful persona and photographer's eye. Speaking of which, there are a ton of photo ops in the game that I apparently miss, like a lot of them, but adds an extra layer of character to both the game and its protagonist. Speaking of character, this game has a wonderful cast of people ranging from quirky and lovable to downright cruel and seemingly made to be despised. Among my favorites are Chloe and Warren, who respectively are a punk rock rebel and a textbook romantic geek. Maybe I like Warren especially because I kinda was that kid in school, but part of that is what makes this game so good. It's pretty easy to connect with the characters in the setting of feeling like an outsider or a semi-angsty teenager. Between Max's perspective and how the world is represented, not to mention the whole, time-changing ability, the game seriously captures magical realism incredibly well, turning the ordinary into extraordinary every step of the way. The writing is pretty solid overall. I wish they didn't use the word hella so much. But otherwise, there are moments that are goofy and whimsical, equally contrasted by tense situations revolving around the citizens of the town. You'll find an equal number of moments that you're laughing alongside the characters versus moments that you'll fear for their safety. They really did an outstanding job at making the characters easy to connect with, to the point that you really feel the consequences of your actions when things come to a head. The greatest strength of this game is the tone it establishes. With its setting, characters, audio, and visual design, it's a tender-hearted adventure with a whimsical cast of teens who are making the most of a small town, and with that, it fits perfectly into this list. If this game looks like your style, you'd probably also like Telltale's The Walking Dead, Oxenfree, and you know what, I'm gonna throw Bully into the mix here for the fall prep school vibe of Bulworth Academy. A quirky twist on common survival titles, Don't Starve is an indie game reminiscent of a macabre, paper-drawn, omniscient view take on Minecraft. Looking your way, Caleb. It's got all the basics. A hunger meter, a health bar, gather wood and stones to craft tools and structures, but Don't Starve stands out in its premise, which sets the overall mood and even contributes to the gameplay, including a sanity meter not unlike The Dark Descent. The story follows a struggling scientist who hears words of secret knowledge whispered through his radio, manipulative words from a demon called Maxwell. The scientist, Wilson, follows the direction of the demon and creates a half-machine, half-nightmare-fueled invention, which gives the demon power and influence over a nightmare realm of his own creation. At first glance, the world is pretty normal. Pine trees and grassy plains, rabbits and berry bushes, but the more you explore and learn, the more bizarre and macabre the world becomes. You begin to find nests of giant spiders, haunted cemeteries, ominous touchstones that respawn the player on death, and the ability to use other dark resources to concoct magic inventions, which you eventually use against the demon's minions and, with some effort, overthrow him and get back to the real world. These machines are core to the story, and the more you dabble with the demonic devices, the deeper the toll on your sanity. The game is a constant back and forth struggle as you manage to delve deeper into the nightmare, but find ways to maintain your sanity throughout. Managing the fast depleting food meter, fragile health bar, and sanity meter can all get pretty difficult. If you don't remember to keep up with the basics during your adventure, you can die very easily. Like the title suggests, you do what you can to avoid starvation, and you should constantly be growing your food resources as a result. What usually ends up getting me is the sanity meter, which depletes the more you're exposed to unnatural pieces of the game. Picking demonic flowers, crafting wicked inventions, and exposure to the darkness each night will damage your overall sanity. This can be recovered by crafting new tools, or picking flowers, or using certain items. Again, hearkening to Amnesia: The Dark Descent, the world will morph and change depending on how low the sanity bar is, eventually making the otherwise cute rabbits look like fearsome monsters, and by the time the bar hits 0, you can't tell what's real or what your mind is making up. This is where the fall season comes into play. The game feels very upbeat and circus-like upon startup, until you hit the first evening. The music dies, the screen becomes completely black, and you can see eyes watching you from the distance, and you are utterly exposed to whatever may or may not be lurking out there. Until you hit that breath of fresh air at sunrise, you must keep your light source lit, otherwise beasts will find you under the cover of the darkness. The day and night cycle does a wonderful job setting the range of tone you experience in-game, with time being your most valuable resource. If you waste the day gathering stones to build a wall and forget to gather food, you starve. If you forget to gather fire materials and enough to keep it going overnight, you'll be killed. The cycle of time also extends to seasons, with the summer, fall, winter, and spring all in the game, each one affecting the gameplay and the environment. Like The Last of Us, you'll obviously get more of the feel of autumn during the fall season in-game, but the subject matter, enemies, and atmospheres of the whole game will give you a macabre, fall-like experience. If you've ever seen Over the Garden Wall, think of this like a teenage, hand-drawn version with darker subject matter. It proves to be a one-of-a-kind, otherworldly adventure into the unknown, and has an alternate version where you can actually play online with friends.
If I had one!
It can be fairly challenging if you're a newcomer, but just be sure to keep a fire lit, stay sane, and don't starve. If this game piques your interest, you'd probably also enjoy Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and Grounded, but fair warning of my fellow arachnophobes. This next entry had enough popularity at its release that there was a movie in the works, but it seems like that's a development hell type project. No worries, because the game sells this story better than any film ever could. Firewatch, like a couple others on this list, is not your traditional video game. More of an interactive story / walking sim set in a semi-open world in a forest in Wyoming. There's no combat, sparse collectibles, and a minimal amount of puzzles, if you could really call them that. But where Firewatch shines is its beautiful artistic presentation, unique story, and setting. It was released back in 2016 by indie studio Campo Santo, but this is one of those games that has a timeless visual style, with an almost paintbrushed look to everything around you. Exploring the open trails of the Shoshone National Forest is amazing, with a variety of locations and discoverable secrets sprinkled throughout its map. The developers did an outstanding job bringing the forest to life, with golden sun rays, tall trees, plants and animals that all truly make you feel like you're wandering in the woods. As mentioned a few times, the story is incredible, focusing on Henry, a temp Firewatch patrol who uncovers strange mysteries and happenings surrounding his Firewatch tower. Your only contact is Firewatch aficionado Delilah, who helps guide you through the journey and uncover the mystery, all undertoned with a hint of romanticism for the mystery they find themselves in, and for one another. The writing and dialogue is wonderful. Henry and Delilah have a joyful chemistry, and the game had me laughing throughout their chats and scratching my head over their existential inquiries. To make the tale and the setting all the more beautiful is the soundtrack, composed by the game's primary writer, Chris Remo. This game really showcases the talent of the Campo Santo team, and sadly is the only release I know of that they have to this day, but is chocked full of gorgeous scenery, music, and writing. This is the perfect game for any casual gamer, with the true gameplay being aimed at the branching dialogue paths that change the relationship dynamic between Henry and Delilah. The story itself is mysterious, but isn't quite spooky. Moreover, the only attention I really ever felt was a direct result of this growing feeling that I was being watched. What really makes this game resonate with the season of autumn, to me at least, is its music and its setting. It borders more on the dog days of summer feel that you'd get just before the turn of the season, but its presentation of visual style and reflective melodies feel a ton like fall to me. The Shoshone Forest is, again, simply breathtaking, and the more you play, the more of the area you uncover. If you want a peaceful walk through the woods, this is the game for you. Through Henry's seasonal shift, you gather more equipment to help navigate the park's increasingly rugged terrain, while taking in the beautiful sights and sounds of your own little slice of paradise. Other titles you may enjoy if you like this one include the next several games. Another prime example of video games as an art form, What Remains of Edith Finch can only be described as a fantasy book in video game form. The writing is absolutely beautiful, with words becoming a part of the diegetic environment as if they are literally jumping off the page. 17-year-old Edith Finch has been away from her whimsical childhood home for 7 years, and after her dying mother gifts her a key, she returns to see what mysteries surround her home and her heritage. The setting is breathtaking, the house resembling a Muggle version of a Weasley burrow, with the additions being made to the house for each passing family member. As you find yourself navigating the secret passages of the house, you witness the perspectives of ancestors who have lived in the home through their writing. A loose thread connecting the tales surround a family curse, of which seems to vary for each family member, but ultimately ends up taking their life. Navigate the oddities of the Finch home, and relive the memories of each ancestor through a variety of mediums, including cat gameplay, a comic book simulator, and an evolving game within a game, starting as a top-down 2D, evolving to 3D first-person, and many more. It's a wonderfully bite-sized game as well, beaten in roughly 2 to 3 hours depending on your attention to detail. The house is set on the fictional Orcas Island, after Odin Finch attempted to relocate the original family home there in 1937, but went down with the house like a ship into the sea. The remaining family, Sven and Edith Sr., went on to build their new family house. Edith Sr., aka Edie, spun fantastic tales and shared them with her family, and Sven led many of the bizarre projects and additions to make the house and the island their own small slice of paradise, and as such, it is a beautiful place to explore. Though the game is mainly linear, the abandoned house and the surrounding beach and forestry are lovely to wander. There is immense detail packed into the world and the way that you interact with it, including how Edith will document what the player is doing. The home is beautiful, yet ominous, old and creaking with not another soul in sight, the tone shifting from calm and reflective to mysterious and foreboding. Atmosphere is the king, or should I say the queen, of this game, perfectly intertwining its variety of mediums with the characters, story, setting, and soundtrack, all of which resonate with the tender, reflective season bottom. I can say this about few games, this game is quite literally flawless in nearly every way. I'd highly recommend it. Did I just pull that script and that audio from a previous draft of this video? I absolutely did, without shame, and I probably saved myself several hours of work by doing so. As for any related games, regretfully I have played none of these as of yet, but from my research you'd probably also enjoy Gone Home, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, and The Unfinished Swan, or, better yet, this next game, which I actually have played. The Vanishing of Ethan Carter is like Edith Finch's darker cousin. Its thematic subject matter is somewhat similar, as is its art style, but its presentation is noticeably more macabre. The story follows investigator Paul Prospero, who attempts to piece together the past of Red Creek Valley and find the missing boy, Ethan. What makes this game stand out, other than the story of course, is the way it's told. Paul is a sort of psychic, who can relive the deaths of characters in the world or find important objects in the world through clairvoyance. His words, like Edith Finch's, jump out into the world, and visions intertwine with the gameplay, making for a unique indie story experience. The story is wonderful, the writing is poetic, and the scenery is breathtaking. Though this game is not all sunshine and roses, it actually gets fairly spooky at times, one area of the game particularly so. It takes minimal effort to push through this one brief area, and really most of the game's, quote, spookiness is derived from its atmosphere and story. Many games in this list embrace the isolation as a core driver in creating atmosphere, and this title is no different. You are, for the most part, completely alone through the bulk of the story, and piece together puzzles using your Prospero prowess. The isolation, ghost-like retelling of events, and Ethan's tragic story all build on a world reminiscent of the Leafy season. The ominous presence looming over Red Creek feels ever-present, accentuated by Paul's baritone narration and foreboding monologues.
Whatever it was, it got out, into the air, and into the minds of his family.
The more sinister scenes are in stark contrast to the beauty of the world around you. Pine trees are stretching to the sky and dot the hills in the distance. Trees of amber are aglow with the setting sun, and buildings are beautiful but bear no more dwellers, as only remnants of the past linger on. Paul stumbles upon memories of subterfuge, murder, sacrifice, and rituals, all revolving around Ethan and the enigmatic sleeper. It's a mystery worth uncovering with a range of scenery and tones that will both captivate and perturb the player until its bewildering finale. And on the way you'll find a range of scenery from beautiful sun-drenched hilltops to dark mineshaft corridors. This game, like What Remains of Edith Finch, are pretty unique experiences in their own right, but for games that offer a similar premise, you may be interested in Heavy Rain, Murdered Sole Suspect, or The Medium. Supermassive Games made a name for themselves with the release of Until Dawn in 2015, but they showed they have a lot more to give with the release of the Quarry in 2022. In many ways, I still prefer Until Dawn, but Supermassive did an excellent job maintaining the story quality without telling this same tale as before. They were able to recapture a lot of what Until Dawn did well, right some of its wrongs, and tell a similar yet fresh story that kept me guessing throughout. It does follow the same basic premise of Until Dawn, classic slasher film tale of carefree college kids in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, this time around, we're set in a summer camp at the end of its season rather than a mountain peak at the height of winter. You assume control of almost all of the characters at some point, and the choices you make through the game create branching pathways, and some choices lead to permanent death, removing the character from the story until the very end, making for a plethora of ways the story can turn, and ultimately your choices determine the fate of the group by the end of the game. You play as camp counselors Jacob, Emma, Nick, Ryan, and more notably, Dylan, played by Miles Robbins, Abigail, played by Ariel Winter, and Caitlin, played by London Tipton herself. Like Until Dawn, the story will always have the same basic path, but it's up to you as the player to see who's going to survive the night. The mystery to uncover is also pretty intriguing. Until Dawn kept me guessing in a pretty similar manner, and the Quarry continued to undermine my expectations in a way that kept me engaged. The basic premise follows the counselors on their last evening at Hackett's Quarry summer camp. closing up shop at the end of another season. In classic slasher movie fashion, the night doesn't go as planned, and the gang begins to uncover the twisted secrets of the area. To avoid spoilers, I won't go into too much detail. I would simply recommend this game if you'd be enthralled by a moonlit scary movie night. On that note, this game actually has a full-on movie mode where you can predestine the fate of the cast and watch the game literally play itself. This isn't to say the game is without its flaws. The camera can be pretty buggy at times, and controlling the characters can be messy as a result. On the other hand, much of the mechanics, controls, and storytelling aspects were improved upon in contrast to its predecessor. But I found myself more enthralled by the over-the-top motley crew of Blackwood Mountain. Until Dawn may, in my eyes, still hold the champion spot for Best Supermassive Games title, but the Quarry has a setting and a tale that truly shows the variety of talent at the studio. Until Dawn was gorgeous for its time, maybe a little slacking on the facial models here and there, but the Quarry, with few exceptions, is one of the most realistic-looking video games I have ever seen in terms of graphics fidelity, and its setting really helps to show that off. Hackett's Quarry is amazing, with bright rays of sunshine shining through the dense trees, and a beautiful soundtrack to highlight the cabin essence of the camp, plus a lovable group with a complicated web of relationships, slowly realizing there is much more at stake than who's dating who. The moonlit night is an excellent contrast to the beauty of the introductory chapters, with fear creeping on the player as you navigate the forest, cabins, and other various locations sprinkled through the woods, all while avoiding the dark figures that lurk behind the trees. It's a good night gone wrong, and it is incredible to enjoy, and the variety of possible deaths, plot twists, and influence on character traits, plus the story to uncover, has really solidified the Quarry as an annual replay, just like its snowy sibling of 2015. There's plenty of other interactive story games like this one, but the setting and the characters set it apart. If you're looking for others similar, you might enjoy, obviously, Until Dawn, Supermassive's Dark Pictures Anthology, and for those who really want more of the slasher vibe, maybe Friday the 13th. This is admittedly my third draft of this script for this section, so I'm going to try to keep it brief. If I covered every map from Zombies, we'd be here for hours, so if that's the video you're looking for, I'll link one in the description. That is if you have 6 hours to kill. Instead, I'm going to focus on a few familiar maps that strike the atmosphere of the season. I'm also restricting myself to World at War, Black Ops 1, and Black Ops 2, as these feature the maps that I return to every October. Though I hear there are some newer iterations, such as World War II Zombies, that's actually pretty solid. For those who have never played Zombies mode on Call of Duty, this stretches all the way back to 2008. Upon completing the World at War campaign and watching the credits roll, you are then greeted with this cutscene. Back in the day when Zombies wasn't a thing in COD, this was a huge deal, because so few of us saw it coming, except maybe the folks who read Game Informer. This was the best game in the franchise to introduce the new game mode, with the standard campaign feeling pretty horrific in and of itself. Simply the color palette and the finite sound of World at War was ideal for building terrifying settings to play in. Not only this, but there was only one goal: survive. That is, survive as long as you can. There is no victory, no secret exit, and no escape. You make the most of what you find until you're inevitably overcome by the Horde. The feeling of desolation is met with increasingly challenging gameplay, as the game mode introduces new goals and obstacles to overcome, such as the Easter eggs, which help tell the full story, but we'll get to those later. The original map included with the game, Nocturne Toten, gave a simple gameplay loop of defending the dilapidated fort you find yourself in. Generating points from killing enemies gives the ability to purchase better weapons and access more of the area. It also introduced the famous ray gun, not the Olympic breakdancer, and the mystery box, which offers a dice roll for either the best or worst guns imaginable. The tone set at the beginning of this map is haunting. You're alone in a nearly destroyed bunker shrouded in fog as pale moonlight pierces the boarded windows. Out in the fog, you can make out shambling figures, eyes aglow in the distance as they approach and begin tearing down the barriers, and they are coming from all different directions. The dead silence at the beginning of the game will soon be contrasted by zombies who increase in both numbers and aggression, evolving their undead groans into howls and screams. I was 8 years old when this came out, and it genuinely scared the hell out of me playing this game mode. Frankly, I consider it my introduction to horror games, as I simply could not get enough of it. I'll save that story for another time, but the important takeaway here is the atmosphere that was just introduced to a large-scale FPS. Call of Duty suddenly turned into Night of the Living Dead, and pretty much everybody was on board. This is the tone that will carry zombies for the next several iterations, including a map that features George frickin' Romero himself.
I'm just not feeling this scene.
Don't worry, George, we'll come back to ya. Before that, we gotta talk about Verrückt, attributed with being the scariest map in zombies for a good reason. In contrast to Nacht, it takes place seemingly near sundown, and the fading orange light is met against fog and smoke from inside an abandoned asylum. While the original map was a quiet, dead of night type feeling, the sanitarium's halls are echoed by pained victims of the past, and these sounds are absolutely terrifying. This map introduced perk machines to further your survival chances, and a haunted teddy bear which will teleport the mystery box to a new location in the map. Another feature introduced is the goal of turning on the power for perk machines and for electric traps, and perfectly showcases the grisly nature of this map, with the flashing strobes of the power room illuminating a severed arm on the switch, seemingly tore off as its bearer was overtaken by the zombies. Plenty of others have covered this map in depth, but its low light, foggy exterior, and sound design all greatly contribute to the horrors of Verrückt. Whereas the second map expands on the gameplay and the horror, the third map introduces some comic relief with the primary cast of zombies.
Keep your claws to yourself, freak bag!
Consisting of a mouthy Marine, a drunken Russian, a Japanese soldier speaking in proverbs, and a crazed German scientist. The set piece this go-around is a Japanese base in a dark and muddy swamp, and is the first map to feature hellhounds, covering the map in a dense fog with a demonic announcer introducing them with a Therese culminates all of these new features, plus the weapon upgrading Pack-a-Punch machine, and takes place in an old Nazi research facility. This map also featured a minor Easter egg, and a few radios that establish most of the backstory, but I'd say is the least terrifying of the original 4 maps. These were all remade in Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 3, but I always found that most zombies iterations from Black Ops 3 and beyond tend to be lacking in the horror atmosphere department, mainly due to changes in the color palette and the sound design affecting the overall tone, but it is certainly very fun to play compared to the challenge of the early iterations. Black Ops 1 is where zombies really seemed to take off. The menu screen for this game was iconic enough, but to make things even more interesting is switching into zombies mode, and watching the scene change before your very eyes. The interrogator walks off, only to return as one of the undead, the TVs begin showing terrifying footage, and best of all, this introduced the classic Zombies theme song, which you're probably hearing in the background right now, that is if I did my editing right. Again, I can't cover every map here, and I know this is everybody's favorite, but I'm not going to be talking about Kino in this list, aside from just now bringing it up. Ascension seems to scratch the horror itch a little bit better, taking place in a Soviet cosmodrome with a disembodied voice pleading for your help, and again, that iconic fog enveloping the outskirts of the map. I also love the detail here of starting in black and white, only for color to fill the screen once you finally turn the power on. This map features plenty of haunting scenery and sounds as well, including undead space monkeys in lieu of hellhounds. Call of the Dead takes place at a lighthouse amidst the snowy tundras of Siberia, which doesn't sound all that odd to me, at least until you see the cast of horror legends like Freddy Krueger, Michael Rooker, and of course the aforementioned father of zombie horror himself, George Romero. George's constant stalking of the player and baritone quips he adds makes this map extra creepy, not to mention the design of the other zombies, which I'll take a quick pause and comment on this. The design of the enemies changes every map to suit the environment they're in, and I adore the little details they add to enhance the experience of each map. Call of the Dead also has this ambience constantly playing in the background that, if you're playing with headphones at least, can seriously get under your skin. It's creepy as hell. Black Ops 2 kicks off in a different, yet familiar setting. Instead of secret laboratories or hidden temples, we're instead in a small American town, with bits of the map scattered through a dense fog, including a downtown, a farm, a cornfield with a callback to World at War, and a classic roadside diner. The new setting and cast was a different kind of connection for players. These were average Joes living in a small American town, like most of the player base. The big difference here is that their town has been destroyed and overrun with zombies, which sells this tone that the horror is now in your home. Then of course there's my all-time favorite map, Mob of the Dead, taking place on Alcatraz Island and featuring another cast of real-life actors. This map, for me personally, has the greatest atmosphere, with the map becoming a twisted and hellish form of an already terrifying prison. Giant dog heads emerge from the walls, new textures for the random box, lightning storms in the distance, and this is a small detail, but this is the only map where the zombies' eyes are a deep reddish orange, rather than the old blue or yellow from the other maps. This would be an otherwise minute story detail if it didn't help make the map just a bit more terrifying. Mob does one of the greatest jobs at conveying the feeling of no escape, and has its own specific soundtrack that helps to sell this feeling of desolation. Last one I'll talk about here is Buried, another fan-favorite map which borders on both weird and terrifying. Featuring an underground Wild West town, a ghost-haunted mansion, and accompanying hedge maze to boot. And the sounds that the ghost makes?
No one can help you.
Yeah, that scared the crap out of me when I first played this map. Long-winded as I've got here, I think I've made my point for featuring Call of Duty Zombies in this list. Big bonus points if you have friends to play this with. If you're a fan of Call of Duty Zombies, you may also enjoy Sniper Elite's Zombie Army games, Red Dead Undead Nightmare, and Left 4 Dead, which, credit where it's due, was highly debated for this spot in the list. Chances are you've heard of this one already. Between its 2013 debut, the HBO adaptation, and a fan-divided sequel, The Last of Us has set the bar for storytelling in video games since its inception. For anyone unfamiliar, the story is set 20 years after a viral fungal outbreak infects most of the population, turning them into the zombie-like infected. We follow Joel, a gritty smuggler who lost his daughter at the beginning of the outbreak and has been aimlessly surviving ever since. Things change for Joel when he begrudgingly meets Ellie, a 14-year-old girl who is more or less alone in the post-apocalyptic world. Though they don't take kindly to one another straight off the bat, they eventually develop a father-daughter type relationship. I'll avoid going into the story too much for sake of folks who haven't experienced it yet, but there is so much believability in the characters, and the writing for the game makes it all feel so tangible. Not to mention how well done the enemy AI is, including the callouts they give each other mid-combat, relaying your position to one another and attempting to flank your blind spot, or even the bits of dialogue they have before you engage in the action. One of the biggest aspects of making this game feel so real is its world design. Again, it is 20 years into the decline of modern society, and nature has reclaimed most of the cities and landscapes from before the outbreak, making walking through the city feel like a stroll through an industrial jungle. Skyscrapers are falling in on one another, vines and brush grow through rocks and nooks and crannies of the broken roads and the brick walls, and something about the dead empty streets give you this feeling of isolation that's both peaceful and dreadful. These areas are highlighted with stunning sunsets, rainy afternoons, and beautiful melodies from the series' composer, Gustavo Santaolalla. I hope I pronounced that right. Emotional moments are frequent in a world where death looms around every corner, and the minimalistic soundtrack often brings a tear to the eye while Joel and Ellie have deep talks on things like loss and their loved ones. The duality of human emotion is prevalent throughout the experience as well, with emotional scenes highly contrasted by moments of tension and brutal violence, as you'll find that people are often as terrifying as the infected. On that note, combat encounters are driven by survival mechanics, where minimizing damage taken and making the most of each shot becomes a delicate balance. For those who don't want as much survival, there are 5 different difficulties to play on, including additional modes for New Game Plus. In addition to the humans and the standard infected, there are also the iconic clickers, who are blinded by the fungal growth from the infection, but this growth has also made them quite powerful. Like bats using echolocation, the clicking sound, for which they're named, is used to see, meaning a wrong step could give away your position and spell instant death. The second game features additional enemy iterations, but the clickers are certainly the most well-known from the franchise, and are most of the reason I would consider this game to be scary in any sense of the word. Each section in the first game takes place season by season, starting late in summer and ending in the following spring, making for a good playthrough year-round. Golden sunrises while walking in the forest, long treks in the rain, you'll find yourself gawking at the scenery at every turn, taking in moments of peaceful solitude when possible, contrasted later by encounters with swarms of infected. Though the sections in summer and fall stand out for this time of the season, the entire game feels like it fits the bill for this time of year, what with the frequent quiet moments within dilapidated structures and hazy sunshine piercing the shattered windows of a society we once knew well. This theme resonates throughout, seeing places once filled with life and joy now turned into abandoned and decomposing shadows of their former selves. This even extends to the characters, who often grapple with maintaining their humanity in a world bent on survival of the fittest. Right and wrong become arbitrary in a world where the rules no longer apply, and you'll find yourself experiencing that on both ends of the equation throughout the series. On that note, the second game really ups the ante there, at times putting you in the shoes of a character that you're honestly meant to hate, only to realize she's succumbed to the gray morality that everyone else in the world has become a part of, even the ones you love. There's admittedly a lot of controversy on The Last of Us Part 2, where you either hate it for what it does or realize that is exactly what it's trying to do, and as such, recognize it as a masterpiece. The best way to explain this is a paraphrase from series creator Neil Druckmann, that the first game is about love, and the sequel is about hate. Its storytelling is a little bit different from the first game, featuring a few shifting perspectives, and the story takes place over a few weeks rather than a full year, but the nature-reclaimed environments are still prevalent throughout, with a few standout flashback scenes that harken to the themes of the original game. Though its gameplay is more robust than the original, I still return to the first entry quite often for the variety of environments and scenery. This is not a knock at the sequel, again, it does what it's supposed to do very well, but at a cost of being cruel and visceral in its story, rather than featuring moments of father-daughter connection like the first. Not to say that moments like these don't happen in the second game, they're just more few and far between than in the first. Both games are extremely powerful in terms of the stories they tell, and if you haven't grown to love some of the characters in this game by the very end, I can only say, you may not even be human anymore. As for games comparable to this, it's hard to find any games that really do justice to this one, but just to throw some out there, Dying Light, Uncharted, and Days Gone. God, I might get some shit for that last one. For those who have played Elden Ring, you may already be familiar with its gothic older brother Bloodborne. If you're not, Bloodborne is an action horror RPG that takes place in the nightmarish city of Yharnam. You play as a character known only as the Hunter, dubbed as such due to being one of the many who scour nighttime Yharnam to rid the town of its beastly scourge. Though the game mainly takes place in the Gothic city, there are a few locations you experience in-game, including a twisted forest, an abandoned college, and an otherworldly place referred to as the Nightmare Frontier. Your only haven is the Hunter's Dream, housing a workshop for upgrading weapons using found materials, acquiring new tools from the ghastly messengers, and you'll also find a mysterious doll capable of leveling the player's skills. Based on these levels, you can build the Hunter to be better capable of wielding the game's many transforming weapons, including the Hunter's Axe, the Whirligig Saw, and the ever-so-spooky Burial Blade. You may have noticed a difference between this game and other FromSoft games is the lack of a shield. That's the twist of Bloodborne. You don't get a shield. Instead, in your left hand, you're most times wielding a blunderbuss or a flintlock pistol, which is used for parrying enemies, prompting the aptly named Visceral Attack. I won't talk about the gameplay forever here, but the last thing I want to address is the arcane abilities, which lets the player use artifacts to summon otherworldly powers to use against foes. On the note of foes, Bloodborne has some insane and terrifying enemies, including witches, giant spiders, snake-headed men, gargoyles, ghostly maidens, and werewolf-like beasts of various shapes and sizes. And of course, anyone that's played a FromSoft game knows that the boss enemies are the cream of the crop. giant screeching beasts, Lovecraftian monstrosities, and whatever the hell this thing is supposed to be. Every boss fight has its own iconic soundtrack, and all play their part in the story, as well as bring meaning to the locations you find them in. Each area you uncover is guaranteed to bring new enemies and an inevitable boss fight at the very end. And as challenging as all of them are, you may find your greatest enemy will be the environment. Ah, that reminds me. The environments are the cornerstone of the experience, and my primary reason for adding this game to the list, though the terrifying enemies are a big part of that as well. As you progress the game, sunset evolves to nighttime, nighttime evolves to nightmare, and the world becomes increasingly erratic and hostile. The Victorian towers and cathedrals of Yharnam are plagued with echoing screams, and streets are lit with the flames of burning beasts. Dilapidated shacks dot the foggy dark forest, and before too long, a blood-red moon and a purple night sky reveal hidden monstrosities that no sane person could ever dream of. The darkness of the evening is only illuminated by the pale moonlight and the burning flames of previous hunters' prey. You can only hope that you don't become prey yourself. There is an insane amount of backstory and bits of lore that build upon the mystery of Yharnam, and frankly, I'm gonna say that going in blind and taking all of the craziness in is the best way you can experience this game. It can be a challenge, but there are few games that have this kind of style, ambiance, or terror, and there's few better feelings than finally slaughtering the foe that's been giving you so much grief. I don't want to say too much for sake of spoilers, but for other gothic horror experiences, you could check out Vampire, or for a challenging survival horror title, I highly recommend Darkwood, which almost overshadowed this spot on the list. For titles with similar gameplay, you can check out other FromSoft games, most notably Dark Souls and, of course, Elden Ring. For those of you who have already played this game, half of you are rolling your eyes right now, and the other half is excited to see it on this list. Frankly, I fall right in the middle of you, because this game offers a lot of good stuff, but is not without its holdups. Like this new feature I just discovered, where the game watermarks the footage you capture on your PlayStation. We're just gonna pretend that's not there. Layers of Fear is one of the many games that filled the void after Konami's fumbling of Silent Hills, which was to be Hideo Kojima's take on the Silent Hill franchise. This title, developed by Bloober Team, follows a painter who returns to his home/studio to finish his magnum opus. Only soon after entering the home and beginning work on the painting do you find yourself in the midst of an increasing number of paranormal occurrences. Mainly a walking simulator type game, the player progresses the stories by solving puzzles, if you can really call them that, and finding clues that help uncover more of the story. Like I said, pro-con situation here, so let's start with the good stuff. The manor and the surrounding rooms you explore are quite beautiful, and starkly horrific when the time is right. Having the vast Victorian-style house to explore is accentuated by constant thunderstorms and regularly shifting rooms and hallways, making for an incredible haunted manor experience that few other games seem to capture, save for Resident Evil 1.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
More on that later. The scares are more psychological and environmental rather than running from any legitimate danger, which is both an advantage and a hindrance for this game. The psychological scares are, for the most part, very well done. There's a lot of variety in the rooms due to the constant changing layout of the house, making for a plethora of setups and different scares. You'll occasionally find the game messing with you, like whispers coming out of your controller, that is, if you're on PlayStation, or oftentimes simply by changing the environment around you. Style-wise, it looks really great. The environments are well designed and pleasant to look at. Sound design is solid overall, what with the use of the controller speaker and the thunderous booms of the storm. I particularly enjoy the piano melody you hear throughout. But all the scares are also pretty well done. Truly the best part of this game is the setting itself. The aforementioned sprawling abode, berated by spooky sounds and hauntings, makes for a top-notch set piece to experience. Now for the downsides. I mentioned earlier that scares are pretty isolated to jump scares, and once you find a lack of any real danger, the scares wear down pretty fast. On top of that, the walking simulator gameplay opts for puzzles instead of combat or evasion, but the puzzles you encounter are mere bumps in the road. Though the house is incredible, and the tricks the environment play on you are great, the story is admittedly a little tacky in its writing and went in a fairly predictable direction. Admittedly, not my favorite on this list, but it feels pretty unique to say the least. If I have to say anything overall, this game doesn't raise the bar as much as it checks the boxes. But for a visually striking haunted house to explore, this is a solid fall game I could recommend. If this is a title you enjoyed, you may enjoy Layers of Fear 2, the remake, which features both Layers of Fear 1 and 2, PT, or all of the other PT clones like Madison, Visage, this game, etc. Okay, admittedly this spot was a pretty close tie with Amnesia, which arguably has much better gameplay, but the settings and atmospheres of Outlast and its sequels all feel both strange and familiar altogether, with hints of the supernatural that bundle up the package into one iconic experience. To be fair, this is not a knock against Amnesia. It, after all, inspired most of the walking sim horror games, but Amnesia generally has much more nuance to its gameplay than Outlast. However, this is all my opinion. You can all disagree all you'd like, just leave it in the comments. In the discussion of games for fall, Outlast really stands out among the crowd for its iconic villains, set pieces, and ability to emulate slasher horror without relying on any of the classic tropes. For anybody unfamiliar with the indie horror sensation, Outlast is a franchise that debuted back in 2013, in the wake of the popularity of Amnesia: The Dark Descent, and Let's Play YouTubers like PewDiePie, Tobuscus, and Markiplier. They took the idea of disarming the player to a new level, sending you into dark corridors armed with nothing but a night vision capable camera to complete the various tasks that aid you in your progression, and ultimately escape the horror in which you're trapped in through the series' many set pieces. In addition to a night vision camera, the series is also well known for its fleshed out stalker enemies, such as the hulking Chris Walker, infamous zealot Marta, and the eponymous Walrider. Just as the characters and enemies are an integral part of the experience, the setting is often as important as the characters themselves. The first game takes place in a formerly defunct asylum, Mount Massive, and many prefer the first game seemingly for the setting alone, as Mount Massive is a sprawling nightmare filled with inmates and often throws the player off as to which are hostile and which are not. However, I think the first entry has shown its age in the last several years, especially in regards to the sound design and basic core gameplay, but I am certainly guilty of overlooking this just to delve into the atmospheres of Mount Massive Asylum again and again. The long-awaited sequel took much of the criticism from the first game, and created what some, including myself, consider to be one of the scariest games of all time. We find ourselves in a new setting, the backwoods doomsday village of Temple Gate, led by self-proclaimed prophet Sullivan Noth, who's led his followers to believe that the end of days is imminent, and the village must take drastic measures to avoid the birth of the Antichrist. The creators claimed they wanted a different experience from the first game, where the player now feels like, quote, a rat in a maze, and they absolutely nail this motif. Oftentimes, the player sees flashbacks to their childhood, a traumatic event that they've turned a blind eye to, and these visions become mixed with the reality of Temple Gate, often leading the player to question where they even are or whether or not they can even trust what they see. A new feature appears here as well, the microphone, which helps the player to predict enemy movements based on sound, but at the cost of additional battery life. More impactful than the mic were changes to the enemy AI and the sound design, feeling much less predictable than the original and really dialing the fear up to 11. The most recent addition, Outlast Trials, I've only scratched the surface of, but takes place during the Cold War and serves as a series prelude. Its setting and gameplay are much more reminiscent of the first, but utilizes a hub area where you can choose levels to play with other members in the trials. In other words, this one's a multiplayer, cooperative horror game that could be played alone, but like Voltron, gets better the more you link up. I wouldn't say it hooks me the same way the other games do, but for an online horror game you can play with friends that is actually scary, yeah, I think this is a good option. The plot of each game are seemingly self-contained, with references to a larger overall plot that's built through the games, DLCs, and even a brief comic book series that bridges the events of the first and second game. Each game stands alone fairly well, but it's worth playing in order of release date to experience the evolution of the gameplay and AI, as well as get acclimated to the run and hide enemy interactions. If nothing else, the first game is worth playing for the setting alone, but if you think you've got thick skin for horror games, just try and beat the sequel in a single setting. Other games like this you might enjoy include the Amnesia franchise, Slender: The Arrival, and the Fatal Frame series. Here's one for you bookworms. Alan Wake follows a titular writer who's gone on vacation with his wife in sunny Bright Falls, Washington. Upon their first evening, Alan's wife Alice is taken, kidnapped by forces unknown, and Alan wakes a week later at the wheel of his newly crashed Hyundai. While searching for help in the surrounding woods, Alan stumbles upon pages of a manuscript written by himself, one he doesn't recall writing. Titled Departure, it seems to detail the occurrences of the game before they even happen, and as such, Alan begins hunting the pages of the manuscript in hope that they will lead him to find Alice. To make things worse, it seems that Alan has written a horror story, and the dark forces encountered in the game seem to be unleashed through Alan's writing. Don't let the horror theme scare you away, at least for the first entry. This game is much more action than horror, though it's certainly got some tense moments and spooky subject matter. You won't find yourself needing to pause the game and breathe after enemy encounters or anything like that. Even the cover of the game bears the words, "A psychological action thriller." This is to let the player know that they're in for a unique experience. The gameplay involves over-the-shoulder combat against the Taken, human beings who have become overcome by a powerful dark presence wearing the face of the iconic Barbara Jagger, who you encounter as the main antagonist of the game.
I insist.
The combat is unique in that you must fight with light, using items like flashlights, flares, and construction lights to fight off enemies. After burning away the darkness on the outside, you can then engage with your weapon, killing the darkness inside. Other enemies include poltergeist objects, which hurl themselves at the player, and also birds.
Ow, make them go away, please!
There are also a few times where you can use a vehicle to your advantage, but for the most part, Alan progresses on foot, and has truly let himself get out of shape. You can dodge enemy attacks, and even sprint using the left bumper, but Alan loses stamina incredibly fast, which reduces him to a sluggish jog. There's a limited amount of HUD, which adds to the immersion, bonus points if you disable it completely, and you even aim using the beam of your flashlight instead of a reticle. Boosting the flashlight with the left trigger drains your battery supply, but it naturally recharges. And if you'd like to aim without boosting your flashlight, all you have to do is squeeze the trigger lightly. The game is experienced in 6 episodic levels, separated by credit songs and television-esque episode recaps.
Previously on Alan Wake.
Since 2010, the debut title has always been one of my favorite video games. It's incredibly stylish between its Pacific Northwest setting, episodic storytelling, and I hate to keep using the word, but cinematic audio and visual design. Character models may have aged a little bit poorly, but the remainder of the game looks phenomenal, highlighted by incredibly well-done Hollywood-style cutscenes, as we've come to love and expect from Remedy. This Hollywood style even extends to the dodge mechanic, highlighting quality dodges with a slow-motion cutscene. In addition to this, there's a few standout moments that players have truly come to cherish, such as the fight scene outside the Anderson farm.
God damn.
Not to mention wacky characters like Barry Wheeler and Rose Marigold. Pretty much every character has their own part to play in the story, which borrows from the likes of Twin Peaks, Silent Hill, and The Twilight Zone. There's also plenty of clear references to its inspiration, with a direct nod to Jack Nicholson's axe scene from The Shining, and mini-movies found in-game that are pretty much emulations of classic Twilight Zone episodes. The story is incredibly satisfying, with levels that border on open world and linear, can be finished in about 8 to 10 hours. There are also 2 DLC episodes that move deeper into the horror direction, and certainly set the stage for the sequel, though I wouldn't say they're essential to play.
It attracted the hunters!
After over a decade, hungry Alan Wake fans hear from creator Sam Lake, lots of eggs in this universe, that the sequel's intention was to be a genuine horror game, and good golly did they deliver. Quick spoiler warning for the first game, because you can't really talk about number 2 without knowing the events of number 1. Just go ahead and skip to the end of this section and you can come back here after you've beaten the game. Are you gone yet? Last chance? Okay, let's go. Alan Wake 2 is set 13 years after the first game. FBI agents Saga Anderson and Alex Casey are sent to Bright Falls after a series of murders by those who seem to belong to a cult. Pretty soon after, Saga and Casey are encountering the same thing that Wake did 13 years ago. Darkness is spreading through the town and its people, turning them into Taken. Things get crazier when Saga begins to see visions of Alan, who vanished without a trace 13 years prior. The game has you control Saga as well as Alan, who is trapped in the dark place after the events of the first game and has been trying to right his escape ever since. The mechanics are similar to the first game, but controls are a little bit different. Enemies are invulnerable until you burn away the darkness, but this time it involves these quick bursts from your flashlight, which, I won't lie, I kinda miss the actual flashlight boosting, but this is much better for the overall speed and pacing of the gameplay. On the inverse, enemies now take a lot of damage to kill, and have weak points that can be exploited to your advantage, including the classic well-timed dodge from the original game, which now stumbles attacking enemies. As Saga, you explore the at times scenic and sunny Bright Falls, and more often, dark and atmospheric surrounding area, including the woods at Cauldron Lake, a nursing home, and the neighboring town, the aptly named Watery. New to the series is the Mind Place, where Saga uses her detective deduction and gathered clues to better understand the happenings around Bright Falls. This became a feature I really enjoyed. Whenever you're needing some direction, or need to take a break from the heart-pounding action, you can thumb over your open cases and catch up on clues. Concurrently playable is Alan's portion of the game. Trapped inside the Dark Place, which takes the form of a dead New York City, Alan uses ideas and inspiration to arrange storyboards to engineer his escape, built in his writer's room, sort of Alan's take on the Mind Place. One of the major differences here is the enemies, of which are mainly comprised of shadow people. And seriously, encountering these guys is nerve-wracking enough, what with their unpredictable hostility, but the way they're incorporated into the level design raises the fear factor to the maximum. Both roles sport more survival mechanics than the previous entry, with ammo becoming much less common and an inventory style more akin to Resident Evil. And frankly, this makes each situation much more intense, as every bullet becomes an integral part of survival. Combat aside, the scenery is seriously the best part of this game. Locations like Bright Falls and the neighboring woods are picture perfect at every turn, the dense forest making for a beautiful set piece one moment turns terrifying the next. My favorite area ended up being Coffee World, just outside Watery, the amusement park music accentuating the dreary overcast and fog-covered woods of the surrounding area kept me on the edge of my seat with both tension and awe. Overall, Alan Wake is a pretty one-of-a-kind experience, and its sequel continues to carry that touch with its heart on its sleeve. With its iconic setting, lovable characters, and mind-bending story, there's few other games like it, and I've really grown a soft spot for both entries in the series, despite their differences. Other games like this you might enjoy include Control, The Last of Us, and our final two entries. From 1996 to this very day, Capcom has set the bar for horror games with Resident Evil. From classic Romero-style zombies, to mutant giants, to razor-toothed werewolves, Resident Evil boasts a variety of monstrosities that would give even John Carpenter a run for his money.
What are you buying?
Across its 8 mainline entries, the series offers something for all horror lovers. Alongside its ever-evolving enemy iterations, each game sports a different locale that intertwines with the story. The first in a Scooby-Doo-esque mansion, complete with hidden rooms, booby traps, and zombies. The second in the Raccoon City police station, also rife with secret hidden areas and zombies. The third game features, you guessed it, zombies, and takes place throughout the plagued city while escaping the titular nemesis. The original releases of the first 3 games feature tank controls and fixed camera angles, arguably for better or for worse, but all 3 have remakes, with 2 and 3 playing more like a modern, over-the-shoulder horror shooter, more akin to the original Resident Evil 4, which helped to popularize the style. But don't turn a blind eye to the 2002 remake of the original Resident Evil. It does that haunted house feeling from Layers of Fear, honestly, better in a lot of ways. Not to mention the ever-present thunderstorms to add to the atmosphere. It retains the classic fixed angles and tank controls, but features the option of strafe if that's not your thing. I just mentioned the fixed angles being for better or for worse, and the case here is certainly for the better, setting up dozens of scares and encounters that owe much of their credit to the placement of the camera. The fourth entry features a cult in the backwoods of Spain, worshipping a body-morphing parasite called Las Plagas. 4 is widely considered to be one of the best video games of all time, and also received a remake like 2 and 3, with the original feeling a bit more casual and over the top at times. and the newer iteration taking itself a bit more seriously. My hope is to dissect these two in the future, but for now, let's just say that they are both equally incredible and both worthy of playing. It's played throughout 3 major areas: the Misty Village in the early section, the middle chunk taking place in a castle overlooking the village, and the final piece on a nearby industrialized island. The first 2 bits really nail the seasonal spooky atmosphere, and the final bit evolves into action movie territory, but has a great conclusion overall. The 5th game takes place in a fictional region of Africa, and leans further into the action that was introduced in 4, but its focal point is on 2-player teamwork, so get a buddy for this one. I wouldn't say it does much for horror atmosphere, but the partner dynamic offered by the introduction of Sheva makes for a lot of fun co-op moments. I've yet to play much of 6, but it really seems to be the most Michael Bay Hollywood Resident Evil of the bunch, with a variety of settings and stories intertwining together to make for a bombastic and complicated experience. 7, subtitled Biohazard, shifts back to the series' roots, but now features the twist of first person, and takes place in a farmhouse in rural Louisiana, featuring an undead father, an insect queen mother, a Saw fanatic son, and a classic creepy little girl. The 8th entry, subtitled Village, continues the first-person trend, but is set in a snowy European village, complete with a gothic castle with vampire witches, a haunted house with a ghastly talking doll, werewolves, and much more. The overall story of Resident Evil gets pretty contrived, but a basic summary is that lab-developed bioweapons turn people into a variety of monsters, and it's up to you to survive the outbreak and uncover its origin. Love or hate the story, what makes Resident Evil truly special is its ever-evolving and thrilling gameplay and phenomenal set-piece environments. Most of the games feature settings that creep under your skin while you anticipate the next beast to make its appearance. The houses in 1 and 7 feel truly haunted despite the lack of ghosts, and the lingering fog in the villages of 4 and 8 tend to obscure foes who appear from the mist. And there is no better feeling than hearing the calming theme of a safe room after a narrow escape from whatever thing is chasing you relentlessly at the time. Some of these foes are more fearsome than others, with most games featuring a so-called tyrant version of an enemy. These are bigger, badder dudes, recurring throughout the story, pursuing you every step of the way. Some notable pursuit enemies like these include the rocket-wielding Nemesis, the rather dapper Mr. X, Jack Baker, and the social media titan herself, the big lady, Alcina Dimitrescu.
Quiet now, child.
The diversity of personalities, or at times chilling lack thereof, make each tyrant stand out in their iconic environments. Castle Dimitrescu is chilling, but it becomes a real nightmare when you hear the cackles of one of her daughters descending upon you. The RCPD station is pretty scenic, aside from the lickers and the flesh eaters, but turns on a dime when Mr. X begins stomping his boots from the adjacent hallways. The atmosphere is built on these incredibly well-designed settings and AI-fueled enemies, but is tied in with a perfect bow with its sound design. Moments of horror are scored by haunting strings and drums, and the tension is broken by an escape into the safe room, rewarded with a peaceful melody of the safe room themes. Monsters make bone-chilling groans and howls. Even before encountering the more horrific enemies of 4, hearing the Ganado yell things off-screen like would instantly send shock and panic through my entire body. Though not all Resi games are made equal, with some focusing on fear and survival mechanics, while others are made to be intentionally more fun and inclusive. For scares, you can opt for 1 through 3, Biohazard, and some bits of Village like House Beneviento or the Shadows of Rose DLC. If you want something more accessible, 4 through 6 and the remainder of Village are more thriller shooters, but play incredibly well. If it's autumn specifically you're looking for, your best bets will lie with Resident Evil 1 for its haunted mansion setting and zombie thrills, 4 for its dismal foggy village and cultist castle environments, and 7 for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre-style farmhouse setting and the horrific Baker family. I will admit to writing off this franchise for years as, quote, those corny Resident Evil games, and frankly, they are exactly that. Quality writing is definitely not what Resident Evil was known for, quite the opposite.
How dare you!
But once you get over the occasional silliness, you eventually begin to embrace it, much like the series has done for itself. And I won't lie, it's actually all the better for it. Best example here is Leon's dumb quips in RE4, which had me both laughing and facepalming simultaneously.
I've sent my right hand to dispose of you.
Your right hand comes off?
For everything it brings to the table, Resident Evil proves that horror games can be both fun and scary at the same time, and you just gotta love it for that. If you're a series newcomer, I'd recommend starting out with the 2002 remake, any version of RE4, or number 7, all of which have outstanding audio and visual design, atmosphere, intense gameplay, and all stories are independent enough of the other titles that you can experience them standalone. If anything I've mentioned here sounds like your thing, you'd probably also enjoy The Evil Within, Dead Space, or, last but not least, of all the games on this list, the Silent Hill franchise is admittedly the least accessible, but is such an ideal experience for the Halloween season, it simply could not be left out. Hey YouTube, I am definitely not emulating any of these games! We'll get to accessibility here in a minute. For now, let's address the folks who haven't had a chance to explore this series yet. Silent Hill is a franchise debuted by Konami back in 1999 on the original PS1. Born to be a rival for the aforementioned and quite successful Resident Evil franchise. The team designated to do so was a scrappy bunch of developers and artists, eventually dubbed Team Silent, as this core group is credited by fans to have made the better entries in the franchise. Instead of simply emulating Resident Evil's existing success, Konami created something new, more strange and mysterious. If Resident Evil is a series that was inspired by Romero's classics, Silent Hill is inspired by the works of David Lynch and Adrian Lyne. Where Resident Evil takes a more sci-fi horror approach to its story, Silent Hill leaned into the supernatural, and opted for more atmosphere, puzzles, and story. The basic premise for each game revolves around manifesting one's subconscious thoughts into reality, typically in a pretty horrific fashion. Before I forget to mention it, this game was also a direct inspiration for the Upside Down in Stranger Things, so do with that what you will.
Pretty cool, huh?
Like I've done for pretty much every other franchise in this list, I am restricting focus to the titles most worth your attention. Also, as done with other entries, I'll avoid any major spoilers, as the story is a huge part of the experience, but here's an overview of each to see if it's your style. The original Silent Hill puts you in the shoes of Harry Mason, who's traveling through the small lake vacation town of Silent Hill with his daughter Cheryl, when a figure appears in the thick fog, causing him to swerve off the road and crash his car. Nice driving, Dad. When Harry awakes, the fog has enveloped the town and he finds Cheryl missing, running off into the mist. When he believes to have almost caught up with her, she seemingly vanishes, and the world begins to change before Harry's eyes. Day almost instantly turns into night, walls morph into rusted metal fences and barbed wire, mutilated bodies and blood decorate his surroundings, and suddenly a horde of gray figures appear from the dark and attack Harry. There are plenty of moments in the game that Harry and the player question what they see, thinking that they must be dreaming, and blurring the lines between dream and reality become a running theme in the series. Don't let the 1999 graphics fool you, this game is, to this day, genuinely horrifying, and I had several moments where I felt like I needed to pause and step away from the controller for a minute. Not the same can be said for Silent Hill 2, the poster child of the franchise, which I'd consider as the least scary of the original 4 games, but the bar for horror in this series is pretty high, so don't say I didn't warn you. Silent Hill 2 follows James Sunderland, who receives a letter from his wife who supposedly passed away 3 years ago due to illness. She claims she's waiting for James in their special place at Silent Hill. While searching for Mary, all the while questioning your sanity for doing so, you encounter Angela and Eddie, both of whom have similar reasons for being in the town. And of course you also stumble upon the most iconic monster of the franchise, Laura. Kidding. It's Pyramid Head. 8-year-olds are still monsters though. This game is where the art style of the series really took off. Sound designer Akira Yamaoka was given more freedom to explore what he calls his type of music, featuring dramatic and beautiful guitar, as well as otherworldly sounds. Creature designer Masahiro Ito was given a bigger role, playing a bigger part in the story and visual style of the game, seemingly with this green and gray color grade, as well as the environments that were dubbed both attractive and repulsive, as he puts it. The game deals heavily with themes such as loss, depression, and trauma, to put things lightly, and I'd wager it's worth throwing a trigger warning out there for anyone who's sensitive to those subjects. It continues the theme of messing with the player psychologically, and its otherworld environments become increasingly chaotic and nightmarish right until the very end. By the way, a remake by Bloober Team releases October 8th, and despite my earlier criticisms of Layers of Fear, this remake is looking, well, I would say incredibly well cooked, but more like perfectly slow roasted. I may eat those words in the next few days, I guess time will tell on that one. Barring any further gushing on number 2, Silent Hill 3 raises the bar on its visual presentation, featuring fully rendered cutscenes rather than pre-rendered FMVs, and features beautiful tones of orange and haunting shades of crimson throughout its campaign. I know it's a bit odd to keep calling attention to the colors of each game, but really, the color palette in each game is very different, and contributes to each game's evoked feeling and style. Anyways, back to the third game. We play as Heather, a 17-year-old girl who's approached by a detective who claims to know secrets about her birth. Widely considered to be one of the greatest protagonists in gaming, Heather is an incredibly well-fleshed-out character that most players can instantly connect with for her teenage angst and her questioned sense of self. She brushes off the aforementioned detective, disinterested in what he has to say, but later the world begins changing around her just as it did before. Here's the kicker this time. We're not in Silent Hill. Not yet, at least. Heather meets a few odd characters in her journey to find the truth, such as the conniving Vincent and the mysterious Claudia. This game stands out in numerous ways, its story continuing that of the original rather than telling an independent tale like they did in the second game, and it deals heavily with themes of identity, love, hate, and ultimately a young girl who grows up to become a woman. They really nail the early 2000s emotional teenager, school's on the horizon type vibe, between Heather's attitude, the presentation of visual style, and the soundtrack, which... yeah, I spend 5 or so minutes in this alleyway every playthrough. Returning to a more visceral horror style as seen in the first game, monsters are more various, numerous, and aggressive, and the same goes for the Otherworld sections, which hold some of the most iconic scares of the franchise. Anyone who's played this game knows I'm talking about the Mirror Room. The last entry in what is considered the original Team Silent games is The Room, which, in my opinion, is both the most terrifying and the most frustrating of the original 4. Folks widely consider this to be a departure for the series in a couple of ways. The addition of a basic heads-up display, removal of the classic flashlight and radio combo, a lack of puzzles, and even a hub-type area which is equipped with your own storage chest and even chocolate milk.
Oh man, that was awesome.
A noticeable amount of the game takes place outside of the titular town, making for a lack of our beloved fog, but we still get a few peeks around the old place. The story of this go follows Henry Townshend, who begins having nightmares and wakes one day to find his apartment door has been locked and chained up from the inside. The windows don't open, and seemingly no one can hear you. The phone doesn't work, and your only solution is crazier than being locked inside of the room itself: to crawl through an increasingly large hole that's just appeared in your bathroom wall. The hole takes you to new areas in each chapter, the room being your hub area between levels and the only location you can save, as you find others from your apartment building have found themselves in the same dream world you crawl yourself into. Things get even crazier when literal ghosts begin appearing from the walls, and seriously, my first time playing this, I screamed out loud, paused, set the controller down, and walked away for 5 minutes at least. The sounds they make alone is enough to turn a grown man into a little girl. The spirits you encounter are intrinsically linked to the story, and a growing number of murder victims with the same MO, numbers carved into the chests of the dead. The fear gets steadily worse until about midpoint in the game, when the remainder becomes an escort quest for your neighbor Eileen, who becomes the new targeted victim in the killing spree. Not only this, but eventually you find that this hub area you call your home has become haunted as well, and if you were blindsided by this on your first playthrough, is a serious wet your pants moment. Between the oppressive environments, haunting sounds, and graphic imagery, not to mention the twin victims, this game seriously is both messed up and incredible, but at the same time is kind of held up by the more frustrating gameplay moments. Though these are all games of the same franchise, each one has its own individual style, themes, and characters that all create a very different, yet familiar experience. The everyman protagonists are all very easy to connect with. The small town style of Silent Hill feeling like a roadside town you've passed through more than a dozen times. And something about Akira Yamaoka's music feels extremely nostalgic, reminiscent of my young teen years, but also haunting at times. There's an iconic feeling to each of them. Silent Hill 1's austere, dreamlike mystery, 2 feeling like it takes place just after a rainstorm, the third game nailing the end of summer gloom of your teenage years, and number 4 sheer insanity. They all bring something to the table in their own special way, building upon the greater story of the town and its inhabitants. I'd be remiss not to mention PT, the playable teaser for what was meant to be Hideo Kojima's Silent Hills, but ultimately became Death Stranding. PT was pulled from the PlayStation Store after the Konami-Kojima falling out, but remains playable for those who installed it back in the day on the PS4, and who have a little know-how. As for the original 4, scarcity and age have, like a fine wine, made physical copies of the game extremely expensive. Well, here at this point you may be asking yourself, but Mr. the Riverwood Chicken, how then did you play this game? How did you record this game footage? I'll say again, I definitely did not use DuckStation for Silent Hill 1, nor did I use PCSX2 for 2, 3, and 4. And I most certainly did not port ISOs from the internet and port them onto a hard drive to play them on a soft-modded PS2. All that, just for these games? That would be literal insanity. Definitely don't do that. What I will tell you to do is do everything you can to avoid the dreaded HD collection, which is collectively agreed to be the worst renditions of 2 and 3 possible. The room is actually available on GOG.com, and hopefully the others will soon follow suit. Staring back to the actual topic of this video, what can I say that you haven't already seen? Between the first 4, these games check all the boxes. Foggy cemeteries, ghosts and hauntings, spooky forests, body horror, occult activity, psychological terror, and my goodness, the staying power of each game is the cherry on top. The tone, the atmosphere, the visuals, sound design, and the story, all perfectly linked together to deliver gut-punching blows and jaw-dropping cinematic moments. In the past 20 years, even within its own genre, even within its own franchise, there's really never been anything else quite like Silent Hill that hits half as hard as the originals, and are a must-play for any fan of the horror genre. If you're a fan of these games, you may also like Prozac, Zoloft, and Cymbalta. And there you have it, 15 video games for the fall time that hopefully add some spirit to your Halloween season. Hopefully you can try out or re-experience some of the games covered today and submerge yourself in the many wonderful atmospheres of autumn. The first couple iterations of this video had overwhelming support, and it really fueled my drive to make this video the best it can possibly be, and I am extremely thankful to you for watching until the very end. All the feedback and reception make the trials of producing this content feel truly worth it, so again, thank you all so much. It's much to my chagrin there wasn't more time to add additional games to this list, but with all of that positive feedback, I couldn't help but draft a new list of fall games for next year. If you're interested in hearing similar ramblings on games like Darkwood, A Night in the Woods, or Fatal Frame, leave a like or a comment to show your support. As I've said a couple of times here, I'm capable of talking literally forever, so to cap myself off, I'll say again, thank you all so much for watching, have a lovely fall season, and have a happy Halloween.